Why do I have a gavel?
I have no idea, but that's all right. Let's stand up. Let's look at the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all for coming. And as is our custom now, I'm going to read the following, make it brief. We're happy to have you attend the select board meeting. The select board meeting is a public meeting, not a public hearing. You do not have the right to speak at a public meeting as you would at a public hearing. However, it is the custom of the board to allow people to speak. We only ask that you wait to be recognized, be respectful to your neighbors who are speaking, and that you stay on track. We are recording the meeting minutes, so please state your name for the record. Finally, if you have not signed the register, please do so before you leave. Is there a register over there to sign? Okay. And that's it. And
I'm going to entertain a motion to open the meeting.
that's what it was.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Thank you. We are in the meeting, and the only thing on the agenda tonight is setting the mill rate. It's open.
Well, at your request, our tax assessor is here to walk you through the three worksheets that you have in front of you and to make a recommendation. So,
Anybody who hasn't met me, my name is Rob Duplessis. I'm the assessor's agent here. We've been assessing here since 1989, with the exception of a few years in the middle there. So normally, in years past, the manager always came to these meetings with the mill rate confirmation. So with everything, with the questions that arose from last week's meeting, we thought it'd all be best, and at your wishing, I'd come here to go through things with you. The three mill rate sheets that you have in front of you that are unhighlighted, there is going to be a few little, a very little change, and really all it does is it affects the line number on all three of these sheets. Line number 8, municipal appropriations, and the resulting change in line 23, the overlay. What we discovered today was that one of the articles at town meeting was for a flat $50,000 to be raised, and what that was for is to cover the interest for the tax anticipation note, the TAN. And it was, I guess in hindsight, it looks like it was a number not to exceed. When the TAN was set, I think the interest on the TAN was $219. The actual interest we're paying in for that TAN is about $12,000 less than what we anticipated. So we modified line number 9 and line number 8 down to reflect the actual amount of the interest we will pay. And because it's such a small amount of money, and as it relates to the total on line 15, really nothing that affects the mill rate all that much. So the first one of the examples I gave you would be using the same mill rate that we had recommended last meeting, which is mill rate. You'll see that on line 19 on any of those forms. And the form that says selected rate of 0.0154. That's the same mill rate that we had in front of you last week. The only difference would be with that $12,000 less in municipal appropriations. It just means that line number 23, the overlay, would be $12,000 more, stated at $52,000 and change. So that's the only change you can see. All those numbers in all three of these forms are relatively the same. The only difference now, and I'm suggesting, is because of the increase in the mill rate from last year, to go from last year's mill rate of 14.6 to this year's mill rate of 15.4, that's an 80-cent increase. We can bring that increase down just a little bit if we go with a slightly lower overlay. And if you refer to the mill rate calculation sheet that you would see on line 23, the overlay is $40,759.77. Pretty much the same overlay amount that we brought to the board last week. So with that little bit of change, in municipal appropriations, it would bring the mill rate down from $15.40 to $15.38. As we think to be the most reasonable option. The other option I did present in front of you would be the third sheet that has an overlay on line 23 of $35,053.26.
But you're recommending the one that gives us $40,000 overlay.
That's correct. Because normally our overlay is slightly higher than that. And you guys,
50, I think.
yeah. Is the board okay with what the overlay is, what it's used for and all that? Anything you would like me to explain? Or? Sure.
I was gonna say, would you walk me through that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm newer.
Yeah. So when you're calculating the tax rate, the basic formula is you add up all the taxable value across the entire town, which would be, in this particular case, would be line number, on any of your sheets, line number 6. $570 million of value.
Okay.
And once you go through lines 7 through 14, where we have our three basic, we pay the county, we pay ourselves, we pay the school. We have some allowable deductions. So if you see line 15, the actual amount of money we need to raise would be $8,735,000 and change. The overlay was set aside many years ago, which would allow us to set a mill rate slightly above the actual minimum that we need to run the town, run the county, pay the school. The focus behind it, the reason behind it was to make the mill rate a nice round number to work with. Before we had computers, we would have to do these things by hand, so we were allowed to set something very, a nice round number.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing so, the legislature allowed us to capture, if you look at line number 20, we can have an overlay of 5% of our actual amount to be raised by property tax. So line 15 is 8.7 million. Line number 20 is 436,000. So we could legally have an overlay of over $430,000. Most towns don't do that because they don't. One thing about overlay, when you raise that money, if you raise that $40,000 that we're suggesting, it does two things. Once it's raised, it's always in the town's bank account, and we cannot spend one penny of that as a board, as an employee, until the taxpayers at town meeting decide
Right.
to take money out of surplus, take money out of the general fund to reduce something. So once it's raised, it's always there, and you can't spend it without voter approval. It is one way that towns will slowly build up reserve accounts. It's like I said, it's commonplace. Every town does it. Just at what level they do is whatever they're comfortable with. Some towns look at it, that's what they pay their abatements out of, is the overlay. Some towns will have an actual line item for abatements. Our abatements, I don't think we're even a tenth of that this year, so if you use that money. So what happens at the end of the year when your books get audited, anything from this overlay that didn't get, would get rolled into the general fund for the next year. Again, giving the taxpayers the option to use it at town meeting. So, because the increases is slightly bigger than what we've seen, to offset that a little bit, you just relax that overlay a small amount to help soften the blow, if you will.
Mhm.
Okay?
Thank you.
Comfortable with everything?
I sort of
You
get it.
understand it?
Yes, I get it.
I'm ready to make a motion. Any questions from the board? Any questions?
We did ask a question on Tuesday as to what the total amount was in the undesignated fund, and I get the whole of what we can use it for and what we can't, but I did want to know what our total is in the undesignated fund. Did we get that number?
I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on that question last month or last week.
I might be able to, I'm gonna run into my office, I get a copy of the audit.
Yeah,
Maybe it's in there.
Barry said it was less than.
Any questions from the budget committee? Jack? Thank you, by the way, thank you.
Let me just grab, okay, thanks.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Good job, Chairman Nolan.
curtains are turning black, Kathy. Do we need to call the,
No, actually, they're pink now. They were not so good looking a couple of days
I
ago.
can give her a little oxygen if she needs it. I got
yeah. Got me worried.
Nope.
Goodness.
They're pretty ugly though, aren't they?
This is.
Oh, check this out.
This, oh,
Yep, it was a interesting time.
Is that the website?
this is
The website and stuff, right?
this is something we're on,
Okay, yeah.
property,
Oh,
you'll
right.
see, it's gotta come to you
Yeah,
this time.
check here.
What is it?
Jack's ready.
Oh, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I have an assessing question.
Okay.
I see the town valuation has gone up by about $10 million, roughly 2%. Is that about right?
No, I don't believe so. I don't think it went up that much. I don't know.
It went from,
From last year's mill rate calculation sheet?
yeah, I looked at it,
Don't believe we picked up.
560 to 570.
I don't believe we picked up that many $1 million locally. That may be the difference between, the state's valuation and our valuation. I don't think we picked up.
Last year, it was 560, 424,
Can I
1
borrow that? Can I see what
Yeah.
you'd be on?
This year it's 570, 650.
I agree with Jack. I spotted the same increase, which at the 14.6 mill rate would translate to $149,310 in additional tax revenue.
Let me let me get the actual mill rate sheet from last year.
So
Because
it's-
some of the value you look at is committed to the tax collector. Some of the value that we cannot put the tax collector in charge of paying would be some of the reimbursement for the state, revenue of homestead and veterans,
While you're up, the rest of my question was, there's been quite a lot of investment done by the utilities over the last couple of years. I wonder if that's at all reflected in our town tax rate, or is that?
they declare their miles of transmission lines to us every year. The number of customers they have, the number of drops they have, the miles of transmission, high tension and regular, every year. They report to us.
If they replace poles, put new poles in, put new wires up, is that reflected in what they report to you?
Yes, sir.
Or is that just
They declare all of that,
they do?
how many
Okay.
miles and the condition of it.
Thank you.
Want an announcement before a week, there's something that's gonna happen in the next 2 days. It's probably ought to make everybody aware of.
I would have taken a chance, but yeah, go ahead.
The fire marshal and the, Bureau of Backhoe and Firearms are gonna be doing a training on the Huss Point Road at one of our pits. You're probably gonna hear some explosions, cause they're gonna blow up some cars. So, you may get some calls. But they put it on, Neighborhood Watch, and Jeremy, I think went to the neighbors' houses up there.
What day are they gonna do that?
They're gonna be doing it tomorrow, Wednesday, and I think he said
Kinda too late to put it on the.
Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday.
Where are they gonna do this at?
At one of our pits on the Huss Point Road.
And when is that gonna happen?
Starting tomorrow, probably late tomorrow afternoon, there'll be some booms. What they told me. They've got 3 cars over there that they're gonna kaboom.
Time of day do they?
They probably, they said late in the afternoon, I think, but they may do it all day.
what I have is the mill rate calculation sheet for this year and for last year. And the $560 million number you guys are speaking of, that is just, that does not include any reimbursements. If I just give him, if you guys wanna copy this as well, I can give this to these guys here. There we go.
Did you make Rob?
Oh,
Cause I thought you had some underneath that were papers from tonight.
yeah. Everyone wants one? All right.
She's got more. She's got more.
No. Alright. So what it is, what you're looking at is, what was in that book was actually, if you look at line number 3, which is value of taxable real estate and personal property, 560. That same number this year was 558 million. What you don't have on that town report book is lines 4, 4A, 5, 5A, which are the reimbursement calculations which do not get committed to the collector. So we actually went down $1.5 million this year in value over last year. But when I saw that email earlier, I knew there had to be this is the actual sheets that we use to calculate the rate. I'm not sure, and that brings up a point next time that's put in the town report. we
So
should-
last year was wrong.
No, I see what they're doing, but I think we should put in these exact sheets, and there's no sense in having two versions of the same number where we can have it. Use the actual mill rate calculation sheet in the town report, that way everything matches. Somebody comes in my office, grabs the sheet, grabs the town report, everything's there. I'm not sure why that was put in that way. I just know the difference between what can be committed to the collector and what comes back to us from the state as a reimbursement.
I'm personally concerned with consistency from one year to the next.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
why I raised the question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question to raise, and I was concerned at first when I saw it until I had a chance to look at these, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Do you have a motion, sir?
I do. I would like to make a motion that we accept the middle one that you recommended, which is 15.38, is it?
Yep.
That would be my motion.
And I'll
Second.
Kathy seconds it. Any discussion, further discussion?
Just have a question. The difference in the cost per 100,000 between I guess the first one and the second one, what did you say, it was like 38?
$15.38,
Yeah.
and originally it was $15.40.
About $5,000 difference.
Yeah. So on $100,000 house, you know, what would have been $1,540, with the new rate $1,538, so a very, very small difference. $2 difference it's a $2 difference per every $100,000 of value in tax.
$2 is $2.
$2 is $2, right? Which is kind of like why we get that overlay down for that reason.
Tom,
Yeah, I guess what I'd like the select board to,
identify yourself, please.
excuse
Say
me,
who you are for the record.
Tom Dowd, I'm also on the budget committee.
Thank you, Tom.
I guess what I'd like the select board to also consider is the process basically allows for an excess overlay each year as part of the process. So the town, if everything is budgeted perfectly, is gonna end up with a excess overlay every year. And I would think that the select board would consider basically applying some of this excess to reduce the current year's taxes, because we're talking, you know, essentially a 5.5% increase roughly. And part of that, by the process, the select board is being informed, is gonna be in excess of what is needed. So I think you should strongly consider, you know, what's equitable to the taxpayers and what the financial position of the town is before you set the rate.
As I understood it, correct me if I'm wrong, in order to do that, we'd have to ask permission from the town meeting, which means we could, if I'm correct, we could, ask for that as an article in the town meeting warrant. But I mean, we can't sit here tonight and say we're gonna take X number of dollars out of, the leftover overlay. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I guess what I don't understand is, I mean, basically, you're letting the process, I think, run the select board more than you. I personally think you should strongly consider what is a reasonable tax rate, basically. And I don't think a 5.5% tax increase is reasonable, especially when the process guarantees that you are gonna be collecting excess tax dollars from people that are on fixed incomes.
It's more than the process running it, it's a requirement that we have to follow, am I wrong?
Well, the other thing is taxpayers voted for this budget. We're just trying to set somewhere there so we got money enough to pay our bills, basically. And we can't guarantee everybody's gonna pay their taxes.
I think there's another thing that's, that's missing in the town reports too. People like me who is kind of unsophisticated in getting to the bottom of things. I have no questions at all about the layout of this report. This is a standard that everybody uses. But it would be nice if we had in the town report a very simple comparison from year to the next of what the school budget portion of the mill rate is, what the county portion is, and what the town portion is. Because we can deal with the town portion, the other two portions are 75% of the total. And they very often drive the mill rate. And it would be nice to see what we have responsibility for, what we don't have responsibility for, break out.
Well, and I would like for us to, once again, I feel like I keep bringing this up on the broken record, but for us to consider going to the same year that the state, the county, the school board is on, so that we're not borrowing money, we're not doing a tax anticipation note, we're borrowing from ourselves. Because that is wasted money every year that we're paying out, and it's a little bit of a tricky process because you've got to spread the taxes over twice in an 18-month period, but I think if we reinvestigate this and, you know, get the taxpayers to actually understand what we're trying to do, that it will save them money in the long run, you know, then we're not, you know, because I don't want our mill rate going up a whole mill every year. We can't, there are folks that can't absorb it. And last year's increase was enough that there were folks that were concerned that their families' camp that had been there for generations, could they afford for them to stay there? And, you know, do they have to consider moving out of Bellwood? You know, city's tax rate is enough lower than ours that, we gotta figure out how we're doing things and why with the best.
Do I have the board's permission to ask the town manager to, look into that suggestion, new calendar year, and also the one that Jack made up as far as how we report the town?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, because Rob and I were talking about this exact issue a little earlier this afternoon, and he has some interesting thoughts about the pros and the cons of syncing our fiscal year.
Can we dispose of this issue first?
Yeah, let's get rid of this and then I'd be interested.
I'm glad to hear it, and I'd be glad to stay afterwards to hear it, but to a certain extent.
Certainly.
But let's take care of this vote first. The motion's been made and seconded to select, what's the middle ground, the one that has the $40,000 overlay, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor? 5-0. Passes. Thank you very much.
Now.
Okay. We're at the, you're gonna be talking business or just in general? We close the meeting.
Let's listen to what you got it lower as a group.
Yeah, but I mean, if we can be as a group, if you wanna close the meeting until it's.
I don't know, we got it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, couple things first. We're talking about using undesignated funds, and the overlay that's there. I would reiterate earlier, like I said, about with these monies being raised and not being spent until the taxpayer approves for us to spend them. That's a big key. My personal opinion, just for one quick second, when you're talking about taking just general fund money to reduce your day-to-day operating costs, it's not fiscally wise, in my opinion. It'd be like using your credit card to pay for your groceries. You need to change the way your spending habits to not dip into your undesignated or general funds to take care of day-to-day items. There are specific exceptions. Some of the towns that I work in, they're very flush. You know what I mean? The auditor will tell you you need 3 or 4 months more reserve in your general fund to carry the lean months. More than that, some towns will do that, but those items are more, should be, in my opinion, they're more for big ticket items, one-time purchases, things like that. So, and it's the taxpayers that decide these things for us. So when you, part of this process, to look at how much the county budget went up, how much the school budget went up, and how much our budget went up. And our budget was the biggest, percentage-wise, the biggest increase. There was a lot of things put back in the budget, just to set aside rainy day funds. You know, we're talking about putting some reserves away for the fire department, things like that. So we had some increases that directly impacted the tax rate that the taxpayers voted for. It's something we always have to remember. The way we do the overlay, I mean, we're talking a $400,000 overlay is 5%. We're talking a tenth of that. So we're being very responsible when it comes to that. Changing a fiscal year, out of my 50 towns, I think there's only 2 or 3 towns that still do it this way. If you think about running a business where you have, our taxes are due September 1st, 9 months of operating costs without getting your actual significant amount of your revenue coming in 1 year, most private entities couldn't do that, which is why we have to have a TAN. The other disadvantage to having a calendar year is, and these are like state guidelines, every town in Maine assesses their property the first day of April. That's the law. Everybody as of April 1st. So your first quarter in this town is already gone before you can even statutorily start making changes. But, and just the way things run year to year basis, if you had a change April 1st, we won't get those changes from the state until early July in all of my towns. So we're talking literally a half of your budget year before we can think about setting a tax rate. And we do it very early on in the process. So if this town was sitting flush with 10, 12, 14 months of reserves in their undesignated funds, they wouldn't have to have a TAN every year. That's one thing. Flip it to the other side, you get a fiscal year town, July to June. Your budget year starts July 1. We're still committing our taxes this week, maybe a couple weeks later. So you've only, at the most, you're talking 3, 5, maybe 6 weeks into your budget that your income starts coming in. All those TAN problems go away. That's the best part of it. Yes, when you get a tax increase from the school, we pay all 12 months in one budget. Calendar year, we pay 6 months of the old school budget, 6 months of the new school budget. That's the only really good thing about having a calendar year, is tethering that increase a little bit. I personally don't think it's worth it. It doesn't really, what you need to do to go from a calendar to a fiscal year, you mentioned maybe an 18-month commitment. What they do now is they do a 6-month commitment. A 6-month commitment where you take half of your county tax, half of your municipal budget, no school budget, because you pay that on 12-month increments. So you have a little mini commitment of 6 months for those 2 items. Those go out, and then you go back to the next. Some towns used to do 16-month. It gets so confusing, and the mill rate jumps way up, and that's people with that escrows, and things just go very, very much haywire. So it's an easy thing to do. He was asking me earlier why. I think the taxpayers have the attitude, well, it's always been that way. And that's Mainer attitude for it. It's great, but I think that it would be better for the town here, because we're borrowing money every year, an instant $40,000 savings.
Well, I think, if people really, realistically, how many of us are actually there voting at town meeting? 100 people maybe,
Yep.
out of the whole town. So it's only those 100 people who really even know that we're borrowing this money every year.
Right.
Because anybody who doesn't know isn't listening. So they all show up the day before, do the county voting, and then they don't actually listen for that Friday. So, you know, but if we just think about the last couple of years of how much we've had to borrow for a tan, how much money we would have saved. You know, and it felt like the last time we tried to do this, it was, the townspeople were an absolute no-go, because I think they don't understand it.
Town manager.
The other thing that Rob mentioned is if we wanted to maintain a March town meeting schedule date, he thinks that that's very doable if we did move to a July 1 fiscal year.
That was one kickback that I would see from other towns. They would have a town meeting sometime in May. I don't see what the difference is. All it does is, if all your budgetary process starts at the same time every year, even though you don't start it till July instead of January, I think it's the only difference. I can look into that, I mean, unofficially, if you guys want, next time, whatever town I meet tomorrow, I'll ask, you know, when's the town meeting?
Cause I'm over here thinking, if we're not slammed through the holidays trying to make sure that all the budget stuff is done,
Right.
that in itself is a bonus.
What have we got against tradition?
Oh, I don't, but,
Tradition.
you know, what
But
worked
it's
100
not
years
always
ago,
the
not
answer,
necessarily
as you
works in modern. Side note, you guys voted on that, I need you to sign commitment papers?
You know that.
I just saw them over there, I can't do more.
And Mr. Chairman, for what it's worth, Mr. Ketchel is fully in favor of this idea of moving to a fiscal year as well. It's something that we discussed with
Mr. Who?
last week,
Who's that?
the last guy.
The old guy.
Was it a Gill or something?
Now, Rob, we had, the last time we talked about, you know, changing in a year, the former treasurer said, you know, that maybe that folks set up a tax club. That maybe that would be beneficial to folks, and I know in the past we talked about splitting the taxes every 6 months, so that we had a flow of income coming in more so than that once per year. Would that be something that we would need to consider to change, just so that we can hit that benchmark?
I think
The
so.
two
I
things that we
think
have
so.
to take care of.
Yeah, I don't think you can have, because of the constraints of having a calendar year, you're getting things ready now, you're 6 months before your budget ends. Don't believe you can have taxes due into the next budget cycle. So having a calendar, having a July to June would give you a commitment in August, first half due in October, the second half due the following April. A lot of towns do that. So it does help out a little bit, stretches things out, and your cash flow is more constant.
Yeah, a little bit more consistent. I know, my son-in-law's in Manchester, and with their tax bill, they get 4 coupons.
Yep.
So they can pay them all at once, they can pay them 4 times a year.
Yep. I was in Wayne Lane today, and they do.
Thank you.
When we had talked about, because of how our tax bills go, we couldn't do a coupon, so that people should know that they could split their taxes, but we might consider that.
You do have multiple payment arrangements? No.
Good.
Could you get us what that candle actually cost us the last 2 years?
For, each of the last 2 years?
Maybe 3 years even,
Okay.
because I know in the past, they usually didn't cost us much more.
Yeah, it's
Well,
got a-
She paid them off
We were
early.
usually able to pay it off early, and then we reduced the amount of the tan on the fourth town meeting,
But we did some other stuff for money. That's what I want.
as long as it was legal.
Well, I'm not sure anything's legal, but I want to know.
The other part of that is, how much money does the town have to build up its reserves in order not to have to go out and borrow? Because that's money that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket too,
Absolutely.
two-edged sword.
Tom Dowd again. Yeah, I had that conversation with Dennis Ketchel after the last town meeting. I said, by you trying to avoid the tan, you're accelerating my taxes 100% to save 1%, let's say, in interest. So that's what you're costing the taxpayers, $100 to save $1.
I said my request still stands as far as looking into those two issues.
With the, move to a fiscal year.
Look into it, and come back with a recommendation, assuming the board agrees with it. And the other was far as how we report in the town report, whether we just use this sheet.
Okay, and if I may, a question to Mr. Sutton on your suggestion about making it a little easier for people to understand how much the budgets went up. So do you envision that being as a dollar figure, a percentage, or both?
I would envision it as being a dollar figure and the impact on the mill rate.
Okay,
That's probably something
That
you.
that totals up to what the mill rate actually is.
I'm gonna make another motion in a minute.
If I recognize it. You got something, Melanie?
Yeah, can you just add to that list? I really do wanna know what the total amount is in the undesignated fund.
Yeah, I looked at it here and I didn't.
do you want that as of a particular date?
Well, there's not a whole lot that's come out of it, is there?
Well, it's money we may have not collected too. It's not actually dollars in your hand. That's the trouble. But we can come up with what we should have. Undesignated fund is not money you got right in your checkbook.
Well, undesignated fund should be money that's in our
It's
checkbook,
not.
because it should be overage that was not otherwise designated for where it goes. So it used to be all the, like if the Center for All Seasons repairs weren't done, we didn't have an article that said, hey, we're not quite done with this money, we're gonna put it over here in reserve, then it kicked to the undesignated.
Some of it's in there, but there is money that is not in there that people haven't paid the tax. Like that.
Can't it be at the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, whether it's December 31st or
I would think.
June 30th? As long as it's at a consistent date and you can follow it. Because it's going to vary widely during the course of the year.
All right, are you ready for my motion now?
Yeah, it depends. Go ahead.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn it.
I'll second it.
A second.
These are the wrong kind of numbers.
No,
man.
you second the last one.
But
Okay.
our software can produce an undesignated.
All those in favor?
balance any day.
She's already got her hands up.
We're adjourning. 5-0.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you all.
yeah, maybe if we did
Don't mean to
as
cut
of
you off,
June
but-
31st.
So we got this.